You started with the date and then you wrote Unit 3 and you drew a line. Now you must please write a colored heading, Geometric Patterns. We have done numeric patterns, which is about numbers. Now we are going to do geometric patterns, which is about shapes. There is two things that we have to remember when it comes to geometric patterns. The first thing is a pattern where the shapes get bigger, and the second is a pattern where the shapes get longer. So the shapes can either get bigger or the shapes will be longer. After your heading, you write number 1, patterns where the shapes get bigger. Please make sure you write bigger in color so that it stands out. Our first example looks like this. You need to draw 6 lines to make a hexagon for step 1. Step 2, you draw the same hexagon, but now for each side you use 2 lines. So it's 2 at the top, 2, 2, 2, 2, and 2. For the last step, you make each side 3 lines. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So you started off, each side was only 1 line, then you increased it to 2 lines, and then to 3. So this shape is getting bigger. Remember, you can pause your video until you have finished drawing your shapes. After you've drawn your shapes, we now have to count how many lines we used to make these shapes. So step 1, we used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line. At step 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we added another line for each side. So we have 18. At the bottom of the 3 shapes, you write the amount of lines. And in brackets, step 1, step 2, and step 3. So at step 1, we used 6 lines. Step 2, we used 12. And at step 3, we used 18. Now we want to understand this data a bit better. So we are going to draw a table. Please draw the following table. You have your input and your output rows. Your input can also be referred to as your X value, and your output can be referred to as your Y value. We have already done step 1, 2, and 3, so you can fill in the output values for them, and then you write 4, 5, 8, 10, 20, and 100. How did we determine the output values for step 1, 2, and 3? We counted the lines. So remember, step 1 had 6 lines, step 2 had 12 lines, and step 3 had 18. We simply counted the lines. We now have to determine the output values for these columns left open. How do we do that? First, we need to look at the constant difference between the output values. So what is the difference between 6 and 12? The difference is 6. Between 12 and 18, the difference is 6. So that means the next number must also increase with 6. So it will be 24. But how do we determine that? If we have a constant difference of 6, you have to multiply the constant difference to get the rule, just like we did when we worked out numeric patterns. Please make sure you also draw these arrows in color, and you can write the 6s below them. Now we test if our rule times 6 can be correct. You ask yourself the following question. What did I do with X to get Y? So what did I do with the input value to get the output value? I timed it with 6. 1 times 6 gives me 6. 2 times 6 gives me 12. 3 times 6 gives me 18. and then 4 times 6 gives me 24. Please write down this sentence as well as the rule. Rule times 6, because you increase the output with 6 each time. That is the constant difference. Let's use the rule to find the output values of 5, 8, 10, 20, and 100. So 5 times 6 is 30. 8 times 6 is 48. 10 times 6 is 60. 20 times 6 is 120. And 100 times 6 gives us 600. Please write these last digits in color to show that you did not use the shapes, but you actually applied the rule to find the output values. Referring to the formula will only happen in grade 7, but we would like you just to memorize it so long. It will not be assessed, but it's good for you just to know. So if we have to write a formula, we will use the y and the x. So we say y, which is your output, equals 6x. Remember, if a number and a letter is standing together or to each other, it means multiply. Or you can write y equals 6 times x, which is just a longer way of writing 6x, or you can swap the x and the 6 around by writing y equals x times 6. Remember, x is only a place value. You write the x, and then when you have to use this formula, you simply add the input. So it's 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3. We now get to patterns where the shapes get longer. We are going to do 3 examples. Please write a 2 next to the margin and then patterns where the shapes get longer. Again, the longer, please write it in color. The shapes we are going to use is a house. This house is made up of 6 lines. We use 4 for the actual house, and then the roof we use a triangle. We only add 2 lines. Then it's like an apartment building. You draw your first house again, then you only add 5 lines to complete this house. So you don't add another line here in the middle, it stays 1. These 2 houses are actually sharing a wall. And you continue the same pattern for step 3 and step 4. All the way just adding an additional house. So now we have to count all the lines. So for the first house, we used 6 lines. For the second one, we drew the original 6, but then we only added 5 lines. So we have 11. For the next one, if we have 11 from step 2, we add another 5 and we get 16. And then for the last step, for step 4, we have the 16 from step 3 and we add another 5 and we get 21. So make sure you have drawn these shapes. Do you see they are getting longer? The house is not enlarging. It's the shape that is just getting longer by more shapes being added. After you've drawn your pictures, write the total amount of lines. Step 1 is 6, step 2 is 11, step 3 is 16, and step 4 has 21 lines. Just like the previous example, we have to now determine what is the constant difference. What is the difference between 6 and 11, between 11 and 16, and between 16 and 21? The difference is 5. So if we know the constant difference is 5, we use that 5 and we have to multiply it. So the rule will be times 5. So the output increases with 5. We have to times by 5. Please write that down. So you write down the output increases with 5 and you can write that in color. And then so you have to times by 5 because that is how we work out the rule. But now, if we do multiply by 5, we say step 1 times 5 gives us 5. Step 2 times 5 gives us 10. Step 3 times 5 gives us 15. But we should have 6, 11 and 16. So what can we do? The rule we know has something to do with times 5 because that was the constant difference. But now we don't get the correct answer. So we have to add a second calculation. If you go back to the original picture, you will see that I've circled the original wall. Here the wall stood on its own, but here it was shared. And it stayed shared for all of the rest of the pictures. And you only added 5. So it means there's only one line that is left out. And then you can use that one line to determine what we need. 5 plus 1 will give me 6. 10 plus 1 will give me 11. And 15 plus 1 will give me 16. After we've timed by 5, what else can be done? We have to add 1 plus 1. Please write that sentence as well and underline the word else. What else can we do? Then we have the rule. The rule for this shape will be times 5 plus 1. And the formula, y equals 5x plus 1. 5 times x, x is only the input value, so whatever the input is, you times by 5 and then you add 1. To check our rule, we draw a table. So please draw the following table in your books. You start with 2 rows again. One row for your input values, your x, and your second row for your output values, y. We've used the 4 examples that we drew. So for the output of 1, we have 6. Step 2, we've got 11 lines. Step 3, we've got 16. And for step 4, we had 21. Please write 5, 10, 20, and 50 as your additional input values. And then we can use the rule times 5 plus 1 to determine the output values. 5 times 5 is 25 plus 1 gives me 26. 10 times 5 gives me 50 plus 1 gives me 51. 20 times 5 gives me 100 plus 1 gives me 101. And then 50 times 5 gives me 250 plus 1 gives me 251. You don't always have to draw a table, but in drawing the table, it's easier for you to realize that the top row is inputs and the bottom row is your output values. Let's write 2.2 in the left margin, and then we draw triangles. For the first triangle, we use 3 lines, and I've already written it there. Then for the next one, we use 2 triangles, but we only use 5 lines. We draw 1, 2, 3, and then 1 straight and 1 down. So we use 5. And then, just from there, we draw another one at the bottom and a line that goes up. So for the first step, we used 3 lines. For the second step, we used 5. For the third step, we used 7. Please complete these shapes. Now, you have to determine the, constant difference. What is the constant difference? The constant difference between 3 and 5 and 7 is 2. What must we do with the constant difference? We have to multiply. So, if we multiply 1 by 2, we get 2, but we need 3. If we multiply step 2 with 2, we get 4, but we need 5. And if we multiply 3 with 2, we get 6, but we need 7. So with each of these steps, we still need 1 more. And you will see it again. There's 1 line that was shared from the start. So the rule for this example will then be times 2, which is the constant difference, but then you have to add 1 to get the final answer. So times 2 plus 1. And then in brackets, please write the formula. So after you've done your sketches, draw your arrows again in color, and on the right hand side, you can write the rule and formula. So now we're going to draw a rectangle. We're going to draw the rectangle by using 8 lines. So 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, 2 left and 2 right. Then we're going to just add another rectangle. So we're going to add 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom and 2 at the right side, and then add another rectangle for step 3. So in step 1, we've got 8 lines. Step 2, we've got 14. And in step 3, we have 20. You can already see the arrows in this picture. What will the constant difference be? The constant difference is 6. If we know the constant difference is 6, we know we have to multiply by 6. What happens if we have 1 times 6? We get 6. 2 times 6, we get 12. 3 times 6, we get 18. That is the values if we times with 6. But we need 8, 14 and 20. How many lines was shared? 2. So what do we need to add to get 8? We have 6, we need to add 2. We have 12, we need to add 2 to get 14. And we've got 18, we need to add 2 to get 20. So we times by 6, then we still need to add 2. The rule will then be times 6 plus 2. So to get the correct answers, we have to multiply the input values with 6 and still add 2. Please draw the following sketches as well as the arrows in color, and then you write the rule and the formula on the right hand side. If the pattern gets bigger, we only have one calculation. For instance, times 2, times 7 and times 10. The rule will only be one calculation. Why? Because the shape is simply getting bigger. You are multiplying the shape. If the pattern gets longer, you will at least need 2 calculations. The constant difference will be the start, and then you need to either add or subtract another number to get your final output values. Because the shape is getting longer, you always add more lines than at step 1. Some examples of the rules with shapes getting longer will be times 2 plus 1, times 4 minus 3, and times 10 plus 2. I hope this summary helps you to remember what must happen with your calculations. If the pattern is getting bigger, only one calculation. If the pattern is getting longer, 2 calculations.